The innkeeper's shrug was almost apologetic, but the weary line of travelers behind Benedict Frost told him arguing would be pointless. "One bed left," the old man repeated, jerking his thumb toward the stairs. "Room 7. Your companion's already gone up." Benedict stood dripping rainwater onto the already soaked floorboards of the cliffside rest, trying to parse what he had just heard. He had no companion. He had guided a merchant family safely to the inn before the mountain pass became impassable, collected his fee, and fully intended to spend the next few days alone while the storm wore itself out. The alternative, sharing quarters with a stranger during what was shaping up to be a week-long deluge, held no appeal whatsoever. "I think there's been a mistake," he said, keeping his voice level despite the cold water running down his spine. The innkeeper shook his head. "No mistake. 2 singles booked, 1 room left. You and the orc girl both paid for beds tonight. Can't magic more rooms out of stone, can I?" He gestured at the common room, packed wall to wall with stranded travelers. "You're welcome to sleep down here with this lot, but I'd take the bed if I were you." Benedict's jaw tightened. An orc. Of course. He had nothing against orcs personally. He had fought alongside a few during his ranger days, but sharing close quarters with a stranger of any kind ranked low on his list of preferred activities. Still, the ache in his joints from hours in the saddle and the chill soaking through to his bones made the decision for him. He nodded curtly, gathered his saddlebags, and climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor. Room 7 sat at the end of the hallway, its door slightly ajar. Benedict paused outside, suddenly uncertain of the etiquette. Knock, simply enter, announce himself. Before he could decide, a voice called from within. "Doors open. Come in or do not, but shut it either way. The draft is terrible." The accent was unfamiliar, vowels rounded in a way that spoke of somewhere far from the northern frontier. Benedict pushed the door open and stepped inside, pulling it firmly closed behind him. The room was small but clean, with a single large bed against the far wall, a washstand, and a narrow window currently being pelted by rain. A fire crackled in the small hearth, filling the space with welcome warmth. The orc girl sat cross-legged on the left side of the bed, a collection of papers spread around her. She looked up as he entered, and Benedict found himself meeting eyes the color of strong tea. Her skin was a deep forest green, darker than some he had seen, and her black hair was pulled into a practical braid that hung over one shoulder. Small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, barely visible when her mouth was closed. She wore traveling clothes, sturdy wool and leather, well made but showing signs of hard use. "The right side is yours," she said simply, returning her attention to her papers. "I prefer the left. The window draft is less noticeable there." Benedict blinked. No introduction, no awkwardness, just a straightforward division of territory. Something about her complete lack of concern eased the tension in his shoulders. "Benedict Frost," he offered, setting his bags down carefully. "Dara Stonechart." She did not look up from what he could now see were maps, detailed sketches of mountain terrain covered in notations. "You are the guide who brought in the Marrow family just before full dark. Competent work." The timing was cutting it close. He had not realized anyone was paying attention to his arrival. "The pass was still clear when we started the ascent this morning. The storm moved faster than expected." "It did." Dara made a mark on one of her maps. "I was surveying the eastern approach when the first clouds rolled in. Barely made it back before the worst hit." She finally glanced up at him again. "You may use the washstand. I have already cleaned up. Dinner is being served downstairs, though the quality is questionable." Benedict nodded, grateful for the practical information. He washed quickly. the warm water a blessing against his chilled skin, and changed into dry clothes. When he descended to the common room for food, Dara remained upstairs, apparently content with her maps. The stew was indeed questionable, heavy on turnips and light on everything else, but it was hot and plentiful. He ate standing, wedged between a nervous merchant and a family with 3 small children, all of them discussing how long the storm might last. The innkeeper was making the rounds, refilling mugs and collecting bowls. Benedict caught his attention. "How long do you expect we'll be stranded?" 3 days minimum, the old man said grimly. "Could be a week if this keeps up. The pass floods something fierce in weather like this. Even after the rain stops, the runoff makes the road impassable for days." Benedict absorbed this with practiced calm, though inwardly he grimaced. A week trapped in close quarters with a stranger. He had survived worse, certainly, but the prospect held little charm. Still, when he finally climbed the stairs again, thoroughly exhausted, he found the situation less dreadful than anticipated. Dara had cleared her maps into neat stacks on the floor beside the bed, leaving the right side completely uncluttered. A blanket had been hung over the window to block the draft. The fire had been tended and now burned low and steady. She lay on her side facing the wall, already asleep or giving a convincing impression of it. Benedict extinguished the lamp, removed his boots and slid carefully into bed, keeping as close to the edge as possible. The mattress was surprisingly comfortable, the blankets thick and clean. Outside, rain hammered against the roof in waves. Inside, the room was warm and dark and quiet except for the soft crackle of the fire. Benedict closed his eyes and tried not to think about how strange this was, sharing a bed with someone he had known for all of 2 hours. Exhaustion pulled him under before he could dwell on it further. He woke once in the deep night, disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings. The fire had burned down to embers, casting faint red light across the room. Dara had shifted in her sleep, now facing toward the center of the bed, one hand tucked under her cheek. She looked younger asleep, her features relaxed. Benedict guessed her age at perhaps 22 or 23, though he had never been good at judging with orcs. He was 31 himself, old enough to know better than to stare at sleeping strangers. He turned onto his other side and went back to sleep. Morning brought no relief from the storm. If anything, the rain fell harder, driven by winds that rattled the shutters and howled around the eaves. Benedict woke to find Dara already up and dressed, standing at the window with the blanket pushed aside, studying the downpour with a frown. "The river will be over its banks by nightfall," she said without preamble. "I can see it from here. The brown water means erosion upstream." Benedict sat up, scrubbing a hand through his hair. "You know rivers, I know terrain. Water is part of terrain." She let the blanket fall back into place. "I am making a comprehensive map of this pass. The river's behavior is relevant, a cartographer." That explained the papers. "Who commissioned the work?" "No one yet. When it is finished, I will sell it to the Territorial Survey Office." Dara moved to the washstand, pouring water into the basin. "Accurate maps of the frontier passes will be valuable as settlement expands. Better to make them now than wait for someone to pay in advance." It was a bold gamble, financing her own expedition in hopes of future payment. Benedict found himself reassessing her. Most people traveled the frontier out of necessity. Those who came by choice usually had either very good reasons or very poor judgment. "How long have you been working on it?" 6 weeks. "I started at the western approach and have been working my way through." She splashed water on her face, apparently unbothered by its cold temperature. "The storm is an inconvenience, but I can use the time to refine my notes." Benedict rose and dressed, moving carefully in the small space. They developed a wordless choreography, taking turns at the washstand, navigating around each other without collision. When they descended for breakfast, the common room was even more crowded than the previous night. Apparently, everyone had the same idea about securing a meal while food was still available. The innkeeper's wife served porridge with dried fruit, stretching supplies as far as they would go. Benedict ate quickly, standing near the fire to escape the press of bodies. Dara claimed a corner table and spread one of her maps across it, ignoring the interested glances from other travelers. A few looked hostile, lips curling at the sight of green skin and tusks. Most simply looked curious or indifferent, too preoccupied with their own concerns to care about an orc cartographer. The day passed slowly. The rain continued without pause, turning the world outside into a gray blur. Travelers occupied themselves as best they could playing cards, mending clothes, telling stories, arguing about politics. Benedict spent the morning checking his gear, oiling leather, inspecting his horse in the stable. The animal was comfortable enough, with hay and water, but showed the same restlessness Benedict felt. Confinement never sat well with either of them. In the afternoon, he returned to the room to find Dara precisely where he expected, cross-legged on the bed, surrounded by her papers. She glanced up as he entered. "There is tea if you want it." She gestured to the washstand where a small pot sat steaming. "I convinced the kitchen to part with some. The price was robbery, but the alternative was going without." Benedict poured himself a cup, the warmth welcome even in the heated room. "You have been up here all day." "Mostly. I went to the stable to check on my mule." She made a notation on her map. "The common room is too chaotic for detailed work." He settled into the room's single chair, a rickety thing that creaked under his weight. "I thought about using a map to navigate the conversation downstairs. Never heard so many people saying so little." The corner of Dara's mouth twitched, the barest suggestion of a smile. Forced proximity brings out either the best or worst in people, rarely anything in between. "Which are we?" She considered this seriously. "Tolerable, I think. You do not snore and I do not sprawl. We could do worse." It was practical assessment rather than friendliness, but Benedict found it strangely comfortable. No pretense, no forced cheer, just honest evaluation. Fair enough. They fell into silence, Dara working on her maps while Benedict sipped his tea and stared at the rain-streaked window. The quiet was companionable rather than awkward, each content to leave the other to their own thoughts. When the dinner bell rang, they went down together, navigated the chaos of the common room, and returned to their respective sides of the bed without needing to discuss the routine. The second day followed much the same pattern. Benedict rose early, tended his horse, ate breakfast standing up, and spent the morning avoiding the increasingly anxious conversations in the common room. People were starting to worry about supplies, about commitments missed in the valley below, about the structural integrity of the building under the relentless assault of rain. The innkeeper assured everyone they had sufficient food for at least a week, but his strained expression suggested the margin was tighter than he let on. Dara remained largely invisible, appearing only for meals before retreating to their shared room. Benedict found himself doing the same, drawn by the relative peace and the strange, undemanding companionship of her presence. On the third afternoon, curiosity finally got the better of him. "May I see your maps?" She looked up, blinking as if surfacing from deep water. For a moment he thought she would refuse, but then she nodded and shifted, making room on the bed. Benedict sat carefully on the edge, maintaining respectful distance. The maps were extraordinary. Not mere sketches but detailed, precise renderings of the mountain terrain, complete with elevation markers, water sources, vegetation notes, and dozens of other observations. Her handwriting was small and neat, squeezing maximum information into minimum space. One map showed the entire pass system in overview, while others focused on specific sections in minute detail. "This is remarkable work," Benedict said honestly. "I have used territorial survey maps. Yours are better." Dara's expression warmed fractionally. "The official maps are made by people who ride through once at speed. I take my time, measure carefully, observe how things change with weather and season. You've been through more than once, 3 times now. Once in spring, once in high summer, and now in autumn." She tapped one of the maps. "Water flow changes dramatically. What is a safe ford in summer becomes a death trap in spring melt. Most maps fail to note this." Benedict leaned closer, studying her notations. "You marked the avalanche chutes." "Yes. 23 major ones along this section of the pass. They are most active in late winter and early spring, but some run in autumn if conditions are right." She glanced at him. "You know avalanches." It was not a question. Benedict's throat tightened. "I know them." Dara waited, but when he did not elaborate, she simply nodded and returned to her work. No prying, no curiosity. Just acceptance. Something in Benedict's chest loosened slightly. The 4th day brought a change in the storm. The rain slackened from downpour to steady drizzle, and the wind shifted direction. In the common room, spirits lifted. Surely this meant the weather was breaking. Surely they would be on their way soon. The Innkeeper crushed these hopes with grim efficiency. "Storm's not done. This is just the eye passing. It will get worse again before it gets better." He surveyed the crowded room. "I need to be straight with you all. Supplies are running lower than I like. We've got 3 more days of food, maybe 4 if we stretch it. After that, things get difficult." A ripple of alarm ran through the crowd. A woman with a small child spoke up, her voice tight with worry. "My daughter needs medicine. The healer in the valley was supposed to prepare it 3 days ago. She has a fever that comes and goes. If it gets bad again, the pass is closed," the Innkeeper said, not unkindly. "No one can get through until the water recedes. That's just how it is." Benedict exchanged glances with Dara across the room. Her expression was thoughtful, calculating. When the crowd dispersed into anxious clusters, she made her way to where he stood by the fire. "The pass is not closed," she said quietly. "It is dangerous, but not impassable, not for people who know what they are doing." Benedict's stomach sank. He knew where this was going. "The official road is underwater." "Yes, but there are other routes, higher paths. I have mapped them." She kept her voice low, meant only for his ears. "A competent guide and a good map could get people through. Not everyone, not the wagons or the heavy loads, but people on foot traveling light." "In this weather," Benedict shook his head, "that's suicide." "Not if done carefully. The high paths drain well, the rock is solid. The danger is visibility and cold, not flood water." Dara met his eyes steadily. "You were a ranger, you know mountain travel. I was a ranger." Past tense. Benedict turned away, staring into the fire. "I'm a guide now. I take people along established routes in good weather. That's all. That child needs medicine. The child's mother can wait like everyone else for the pass to open." Dara was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "You are afraid." The word hit like a physical blow. Benedict's hands clenched at his sides. "I'm realistic. There's a difference. Perhaps." She moved away, heading for the stairs. "Or perhaps they are the same thing, and you have simply convinced yourself otherwise." He wanted to be angry at her presumption, but the anger would not come. Instead, he felt hollowed out, scraped raw. He remained by the fire long after she left, watching the flames and remembering things he had spent 3 years trying to forget. That night, he lay awake while Dara slept peacefully beside him. The rain had picked up again, just as the innkeeper predicted. Thunder rolled in the distance. Benedict stared at the dark ceiling and saw other mountains, other storms, saw faces of people who had trusted him, who had followed where he led, saw snow and heard screaming and felt the terrible, helpless terror of being buried alive while others died around him. He had been 28, leading a party of 6 through a mountain pass in early spring. Experienced travelers, well-equipped, following all the proper precautions. He had checked the avalanche risk, had judged it acceptable, had been wrong. The slide had taken 4 of them. Benedict and one other had survived, dug out by a rescue party 12 hours later, frostbitten and traumatized. The official inquiry had cleared him of negligence. The territory's chief ranger had personally assured him that avalanches were unpredictable, that he had done everything right, that it was simply bad luck. Benedict had handed in his resignation the next day. No amount of reassurance could change the fundamental truth. His judgment had failed and people had died. He would not risk that again. Would not put himself in a position where others' lives depended on decisions he could not trust himself to make correctly. Being a guide was different. Safe. He took people along established routes, well-marked and well-traveled. If weather threatened, he turned back. If conditions looked questionable, he waited. He never pushed limits, never took risks. It was a smaller life than the one he had imagined as a young ranger, but it was one where he could sleep at night. Except he was not sleeping now. He was thinking about a sick child and a worried mother and Dara's quiet certainty that the pass was not impassable. He was thinking about his maps, gathering dust in his saddlebags, marked with all the old ranger knowledge he had spent 3 years trying to ignore. When morning came, he was hollow-eyed and grim. Dara gave him a considering look but said nothing. They went through their morning routine in silence. Downstairs, the mood had soured overnight. The child with the fever was worse, her mother's face drawn with worry. The innkeeper's supplies were visibly dwindling. Tempers were short, and arguments broke out over trivial things. Benedict ate his meager breakfast and retreated to the stable, seeking escape in the familiar work of caring for his horse. The animal nickered at his approach, butting its head against his shoulder. He stroked the broad nose absently, his mind elsewhere, still afraid. He turned to find Dara standing in the stable doorway, her mule at her shoulder. The creature was short and sturdy, with an intelligent eye and a calm demeanor. "Still realistic," Benedict said. "The child's fever is worse. The mother is talking about trying to go down herself." Dara led her mule to the next stall, checking its hooves with practiced efficiency. "She will die if she attempts it alone. She has no map, no mountain experience, and insufficient gear." Benedict's jaw tightened. Then someone should stop her. Someone should help her. Dara straightened, fixing him with a level stare. "You know the mountains. I have the maps. Together we could get her to the valley safely, get the medicine, bring it back. And if we judge wrong, if conditions are worse than you think, if your maps are incomplete, then we turn back." She said it simply, as if it were obvious. "I am not suggesting we throw ourselves off a cliff. I am suggesting we attempt something difficult because the alternative is worse." "The alternative is waiting," Benedict said. "The storm will pass. The pass will open. And the child might be dead by then." Dara's voice remained even, but something flickered in her eyes. "I understand you are afraid. Fear is not unreasonable, but paralysis disguised as caution is something else entirely. You do not understand anything about it. Then explain it to me." The invitation hung in the air between them. Benedict turned away, gripping the stall door hard enough that his knuckles went white. For a long moment, the only sounds were rain on the stable roof and the quiet shifting of animals in their stalls. 3 years ago, he said finally, voice rough, I led a party into an avalanche. 4 people died. I was the guide. I made the decision to proceed. It was the wrong decision. Dara listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for several heartbeats. Then, what were the conditions? What, the conditions? Whether snow-packed time of day, what were they? Benedict's brow furrowed. Why does that matter? Because I want to understand if you made a bad decision or if you encountered bad luck. Dara leaned against the stall door. They are different things. The inquiry said it was bad luck. I do not believe them. Why not? Because people died. The words came out harder than he intended. Because I was responsible and they died. You were responsible for making the best decision you could with the information available, Dara said. You were not responsible for controlling the mountain. The mountain does what it does, regardless of human judgment. That's a convenient absolution. It is an accurate assessment of how terrain works. She tilted her head, studying him. You cannot control avalanches, Benedict. You can only evaluate risk and make choices. Sometimes those choices have terrible outcomes despite being correct at the time they are made. Benedict wanted to argue, but the words would not come. He had never framed it that way, had never separated the decision from the outcome, the judgment from the uncontrollable. The inquiry had tried to make that distinction. His fellow rangers had tried. He had not been able to hear it, too drowned in grief and guilt. I cannot make those decisions anymore, he said quietly. I do not trust my judgment. Then we will make the decisions together. Dara said it matter-of-factly, as if solving a simple logistical problem. I have the terrain knowledge. You have the experience. We evaluate together, proceed, or turn back together. Neither of us carries it alone. The suggestion was so unexpected, so utterly practical that Benedict almost laughed. Shared responsibility. Shared judgment. It did not erase the past, but it offered something he had not considered, a path forward that was neither reckless nor paralyzed. You would trust my judgment on a dangerous route. I would trust our combined judgment. Dara's expression was serious. Alone, either of us might fail. Together, we are less likely to miss important factors. Benedict looked at her, this orc cartographer who had appeared in his life through nothing more than an innkeeper's shortage of rooms. She stood calm and certain, offering neither false comfort nor harsh judgment, just practical partnership. Something in his chest shifted, a weight redistributing. Let me see your maps, he said. The high paths. I want to assess them properly. They spread the maps across a stack of hay bales, studying the terrain by the gray light filtering through the stable doors. Dara's notes were meticulous, her observations sound. The high path she had marked ran along a ridgeline, staying above the flood zone but exposed to wind. It would be cold, potentially treacherous in poor visibility, but structurally sound. The rock face was stable, the path wide enough for single file. Benedict traced the route with his finger, cross-referencing his mental map of the region. He had ranged through this area years ago, knew the bones of the mountain. Dara's map aligned with his memory, but added layers of detail he had never noted. Together, the information painted a complete picture. This section, he said, pointing to a narrow traverse, gets ice even in autumn if the temperature drops. We would need to evaluate it carefully before committing. Agreed, and here. Dara indicated a steep descent. The runoff will be significant. We would need to time our crossing for when water volume is lowest. They went through the entire route point by point, identifying risks, planning contingencies. Benedict felt something old and familiar stirring, the part of him that had loved this work, that had felt most alive when reading terrain and making judgment calls. It was terrifying to touch that part of himself again. It was also undeniable. "We could do it," he said finally. "Not easily, but it is possible." "Then we should do it." Dara began rolling up the maps. "The question is whether we take the mother with us or go alone and bring the medicine back," Benedict considered. "Taking her is more risk, an inexperienced traveler in difficult conditions. But if something goes wrong, if we cannot return, at least she is with us and has a chance." Dara secured the maps with practiced efficiency. "I think we should offer her the choice." They found the mother in the common room, sitting beside her daughter's makeshift bed near the fire. The girl was perhaps 5, flushed with fever, breathing rapidly. The mother looked up as they approached, hope and fear warring in her expression. Benedict crouched beside the bed, keeping his voice gentle. "My name is Benedict Frost. I'm a guide. This is Dara Stonechart, a cartographer. We believe we can get through to the valley using a high path. We are willing to go for the medicine your daughter needs." The mother's eyes widened. "Truly, you can get through. It will be dangerous," Dara said. "We cannot guarantee success, but we believe it is possible." "How long would it take?" Benedict calculated. "Down and back, if conditions are favorable, 2 days, possibly 3. The mother looked at her daughter, then back at them. "Take me with you, please. I cannot sit here while she gets worse. If you are going anyway, let me come." "The route is difficult," Benedict warned. "Steep in places, exposed to weather, you would need to follow instructions exactly." "I will do whatever you say." She clutched his arm. "Please, she is all I have." Benedict looked at Dara, who nodded fractionally. Decision made together, just as she had proposed. "Be ready in 1 hour. Bring only essential gear. Dress warmly. We leave as soon as we are prepared." Word spread quickly through the inn. The innkeeper provided what additional supplies he could spare: rope, a lantern, dried meat. A merchant donated a waterproof cloak. A teamster contributed a flask of brandy. The collective anxiety found outlet in equipping the expedition, everyone contributing what they could to improve the odds. Benedict packed with the methodical care of long experience. Warm clothes, fire-starting materials, his ranger knife, rope, a small medical kit. Light enough to move quickly, comprehensive enough to handle emergencies. He had done this 100 times as a ranger, but his hands still shook slightly as he cinched the pack closed. Dara appeared in the doorway. "Ready?" "Nearly." He looked at her. "You are certain about this?" "I am certain it is worth attempting." She met his eyes steadily. "That is not the same as certainty of success." "No, it is not." They stood there for a moment, acknowledging the risk, the possibility of failure. Then Dara smiled, a small thing, barely there. "I am glad it is you coming with me. I think we will be good at this together." Benedict discovered he believed her. "I think we will too." They gathered in the stable: Benedict, Dara, and the mother, whose name was Innkeeper. She was perhaps 30, lean and worn from hard living, but there was steel in her eyes. This was not a woman who gave up easily. Benedict respected that immediately. "The rules are simple," he said. "I lead. Dara follows, then you, Innkeeper, you stay in line. You do not take shortcuts or try to go faster. If I say stop, you stop immediately. If I say we turn back without argument." "Understood," Innkeeper nodded. "Understood. We travel roped together on exposed sections. If one person falls, the others anchor. Keep the rope tight but not taut." He looked between them. "Dara, you've climbed before, extensively." "Good, Innkeeper. I grew up on a farm in the hill country. I've scrambled around rock faces. I'm not helpless." "I did not think you were." Benedict checked the rope coils one final time. "Let's go." They departed through the stable's back door, avoiding the crowd in the common room. Better not to make a spectacle of it. The rain had settled into a cold, steady mist, visibility perhaps 100 yards. Not ideal, but workable. They climbed the slope behind the inn. angling for the ridge where Dara's high path began. The going was steep, but not technical. Elinor kept pace without complaint, her breathing controlled. Dara moved with the efficient grace of someone who spent significant time in rough country. Benedict led from memory and instinct, his ranger training surfacing like muscle memory. Find the solid footing. Test before committing weight. Keep moving but do not rush. They reached the ridgeline as afternoon faded toward evening. The high path stretched before them, a narrow track along the spine of the mountain. To their left, the slope fell away sharply into mist. To their right, the ground rose toward higher peaks, invisible in the low clouds. The wind was stronger here, cutting through layers of clothing. "We rope up now," Benedict said. He tied Elinor in the middle, himself in front, Dara in the rear. 30 feet between us. Keep the rope visible at all times. If the mist gets thicker, we stop until it clears. They proceeded in silence, concentration absolute. The path was everything Dara's map promised: solid rock, wide enough for safe footing, but exposed and treacherous in the weather. Benedict set a steady pace, testing each section before allowing the others to follow. Behind him, he could hear Elinor's controlled breathing, Dara's quiet footfalls. Darkness came quickly in the mountains. They pressed on, using the lantern sparingly to preserve oil. The mist thinned slightly, starlight filtering through gaps in the clouds. Benedict found himself slipping into the old rhythms, the total focus that came with high-risk terrain. The fear was there, but it was clean fear, sharpening rather than paralyzing. This was the work he had been made for. They reached the narrow traverse around midnight. Benedict studied it by lantern light, looking for ice. The temperature was just above freezing, the rock wet but not frozen. He tested the first section carefully, then turned back. Single file. Hands on the rock wall to the right. Small steps. Do not look down. Elinor swallowed hard but nodded. Benedict went first, talking her through each step. "Good, now move your right foot. Feel for solid rock. Yes, there. Now shift your weight. Excellent." Slow, patient, deliberate. Behind Elinor, Dara moved with calm confidence, an anchor of stability. They cleared the traverse without incident. On the far side, Elinor sagged against the rock face, breathing hard. "I did not think I could do that." "You did well," Benedict said honestly. "We are past the worst of it. The descent from here is steep but straightforward." They rested briefly, sharing water and dried meat. The clouds were breaking up overhead, patches of star-studded sky appearing between ragged edges. Dara consulted her maps by lantern light, confirming their position. "Another 3 hours to the valley floor if we maintain this pace," she said. "We should arrive before dawn." They did, exhausted but intact. The valley town sat dark and quiet in the pre-dawn stillness, its buildings hunched against the rain. Benedict led them to the healer's house, knocked firmly. A light appeared, and an elderly woman opened the door, blinking sleep from her eyes. "Elinor," she stared in disbelief. "How did you get through? The pass is closed." "High path," Elinor said tersely. "I need the medicine for my daughter. The fever is worse." The healer ushered them inside, moving with the brisk efficiency of her profession. She prepared the medication while they dried off by her fire, asking terse questions about the child's symptoms. Within the hour, Elinor had a carefully wrapped packet of powders and detailed instructions. "Get this into her 3 times a day," the healer said. "The fever should break within 48 hours. If it does not, come back." She looked at them seriously. "You are going back the same way you came." "Yes," Benedict said. "Rest first. At least a few hours. You will make fatal mistakes if you try to climb in your condition." She was right, though Benedict chafed at the delay. They accepted her offer of pallets by the fire, falling into deep, dreamless sleep the moment they lay down. When they woke, midday sun slanted through the windows. The storm had passed completely, the sky a clear, brilliant blue. The return journey was faster, accomplished in daylight with better visibility. The terrain that had been treacherous in darkness and mist became merely difficult in sunshine. They made good time, reaching the inn as the sun touched the western peaks. The common room erupted when they entered. Elena rushed to her daughter, administering the first dose of medicine with shaking hands. The other travelers crowded around, asking questions, offering congratulations. The innkeeper produced a bottle of decent wine from somewhere, insisting they accept it on the house. Benedict and Dara escaped to their room as soon as politeness allowed, both too exhausted for celebration. They collapsed onto the bed fully clothed, too tired even to remove their boots. Dara lay on her back staring at the ceiling. "We did it," she said, wonder in her voice. "We did." Benedict felt the truth of it settling in his bones. They had judged correctly, had planned well, had succeeded. The paralysis that had gripped him for 3 years felt different now, not gone but lessened. Manageable. "You were wrong, you know," Dara said after a moment. "About what?" "About not trusting your judgment. Your judgment was sound at every step." She turned her head to look at him. "You are still a ranger, Benedict. You just forgot for a while." He wanted to deny it, to point out all the ways he had relied on her maps, her observations, her confidence. But the truth was more complex. They had each brought essential skills, had complemented each other perfectly. She was right that his judgment had held, but it had held because he was not carrying the burden alone. "I could not have done it without your maps," he said. "And I could not have done it without your experience." Dara smiled. "That is what partnership means, bringing different strengths to the same goal. Partnership." The word resonated in ways Benedict had not expected. He looked at this orc woman who had tumbled into his life through random chance, who had seen through his careful defenses to the fear beneath, who had offered not comfort but challenge, not absolution but collaboration, who had stood beside him on a narrow mountain path and trusted his judgment even when he could not. "I think," he said carefully, "that I would like to continue this partnership." Dara's smile widened. "I was hoping you would say that. I still have half the pass to map, and a guide with ranger training would be invaluable." "I meant beyond the mapping project." She went very still. "What did you mean?" Benedict propped himself on one elbow, looking down at her. "I meant that I have been alone for 3 years because I thought that was safer. That I could not be trusted with anyone's well-being, including my own. You showed me I was wrong about that. I would like to keep being wrong about it. With you." Dara sat up slowly, her tea-colored eyes searching his face. "You are saying you want to travel together. I am saying I want to build a life together." The words felt enormous, terrifying, absolutely right. "You need a guide. I need a cartographer. We are good at this together. We could be good at other things too." "What other things?" "I do not know yet." Benedict reached out, taking her hand carefully. Her skin was warm, her fingers calloused from holding drafting tools and climbing rock. "But I would like to find out." Dara looked at their joined hands for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "I have been alone most of my life. Orcs are not always welcome in human spaces. I learned to prefer solitude because it was simpler than rejection. I have no intention of rejecting you. You say that now." She met his eyes. "But we have known each other less than a week, shared a bed out of necessity, completed one successful expedition. That is not enough to build a life on." "You are right," Benedict acknowledged. "It is not. But it is enough to build a beginning on. The rest we figure out as we go." "That is not a very careful approach." "No," he agreed. "It is not. But careful has kept me frozen for 3 years. I think it is time to try something different." Dara's expression shifted, something complicated moving behind her eyes. fear, hope, longing, caution. Then she squeezed his hand, a small gesture that felt monumental. I think I would like to try something different too. They stayed like that for a while, sitting together on the bed, holding hands and letting the weight of the decision settle. Outside, the inn buzzed with activity, but in their small room the world had contracted to just the two of them and the future unfurling at their feet. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them properly. They shifted into sleep positions, no longer clinging to opposite edges of the bed but meeting somewhere in the middle. Dara's head found Benedict's shoulder. His arm curved around her waist. It felt natural, inevitable, like a route snapping into clarity on a map. Over the following days, as the past drained and travel resumed, they solidified their plans. Dara would complete her mapping project. Benedict would guide her, apply his ranger knowledge to her cartographic work. They would split the proceeds when the maps sold to the Territorial Survey Office. After that, they would see what opportunities arose, guiding work perhaps, exploration contracts. The frontier was vast and largely unmapped. Two people with their combined skills could make a good living. More than that, though, they would make a good life. The other travelers departed gradually as the road reopened. Alina and her daughter, fever-broken, color returning, left with a merchant caravan, thanking Benedict and Dara profusely. The teamsters and traders and families dispersed to their various destinations. Within a week, the cliffside rest returned to its normal quiet operation. Benedict and Dara stayed an extra few days, both needing the rest, neither quite ready to leave the room that had become their shared space. They fell into easy rhythms, waking together, sharing meals, discussing maps and routes and plans. The innkeeper observed their partnership with a knowing smile but said nothing. He had seen stranger things in his years running a mountain inn. On their final morning, Dara rolled up her maps while Benedict packed their gear. "Where do we go first?" she asked. "East," Benedict said. "You mentioned the eastern approach still needs detailed work. We can start there, work our way through systematically. That will take us into winter. Then we find a town to winter in. Continue the work in spring." He looked at her seriously. "Unless you want to work through winter, I can handle cold weather." "I want to winter in a town," Dara said, "somewhere with a good fire and a real bed." She paused, then added carefully, "One bed would be acceptable. I have grown accustomed to sharing." Benedict crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. "One bed sounds perfect." He kissed her then, the first time their lips had met. It was gentle and tentative, a question as much as a statement. Dara leaned into it, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "We should go," Dara said, though she made no move to step away. "The day is wasting. Let it waste a little longer." They did eventually depart, settling their account with the innkeeper and thanking him for his hospitality. The old man waved them off with genuine warmth. "Safe travels," he said. "Come back through when you can. I'll save you room 7. The pass had transformed in the days since the storm. The river ran clear and blue between its banks, the road dried to packed earth, the mountains sharp against a crystalline sky. They rode side by side, Benedict on his horse and Dara on her stolid mule, climbing toward the high country. The work went well. Dara sketched and measured while Benedict scouted routes and kept watch for hazards. They developed a smooth collaboration, each anticipating the other's needs, communicating in shorthand that evolved naturally. In the evenings, they made camp and reviewed the day's progress, refining maps by firelight. They also learned each other in the ways new lovers do. Dara was methodical in affection, as in everything else, careful and thorough. Benedict discovered depths of tenderness he had thought buried with his ranger career. They talked late into the night, sharing histories and hopes and fears. Dara spoke of growing up in an orc community on the far frontier, leaving to pursue her passion for cartography despite her family's bewilderment. Benedict described his years as a ranger, the pride and purpose he had found in the work, the devastation of losing it. "You think about them often?" Dara asked one night, tucked against his side beneath shared blankets. "The people who died, every day." Benedict stared at the stars scattered across the black vault of sky. "I do not think that will change. It should not. They deserve to be remembered." She was quiet for a moment. "But perhaps now you can remember them without it destroying you. Perhaps." He tightened his arm around her. "You helped with that. We helped each other." Dara tilted her face up to kiss his jaw. "That is what we do." As autumn deepened toward winter, they completed the eastern approach and began working on the northern sections. The weather turned cold, frost glittering on the ground in the mornings, their breath steaming in the thin mountain air. They pushed the season as far as they dared, eager to maximize progress before winter forced them to lower elevations. The first serious snow caught them on a high plateau, fat flakes falling thick and fast from a leaden sky. They made camp quickly, stringing a tarp between rocks to create a windbreak. Dara watched the snow accumulate with a frown. "We should descend tomorrow," she said. "This is the leading edge of winter. More will follow." Benedict nodded. They had known this was coming, had planned for it. "There is a town 3 days east, Pharaoh's Creek, big enough to have a proper inn, small enough that prices will not be outrageous. You have been there before, years ago on a ranging patrol. It is a good place, quiet." He smiled at her. "We can rent a room for the winter. I can pick up guide work for local travelers. You can refine your maps." "That sounds perfect." They reached Pharaoh's Creek as the first major blizzard swept in, riding into town just ahead of the storm. The settlement was everything Benedict remembered: a cluster of sturdy buildings nestled in a sheltered valley, smoke rising from chimneys, livestock safe in barns. The inn was called the Oakwood, run by a middle-aged couple who welcomed them warmly. "How long will you be staying?" the wife asked, showing them to a room on the second floor. Benedict looked at Dara. "Through the winter. 4 months, perhaps 5. We can offer a reduced rate for long-term guests." She named a price that was fair. "Includes 2 meals a day and use of the common room." "We will take it," Dara said. The room was larger than the one at the cliffside rest, with a real bed, a writing desk, and a window overlooking the main street. Dara immediately claimed the desk for her mapping work, spreading out her materials with satisfaction. Benedict watched her organize her space, something warm expanding in his chest. This was home. Not the room specifically, but wherever they were together. Wherever they could work side by side, sleep tangled together, build toward a shared future. It was more than he had imagined possible when he resigned his ranger commission 3 years ago. More than he had allowed himself to hope for. Winter settled over the valley like a blanket. Snow piled high, the world contracting to the warm confines of the inn and the small radius of town. Benedict found work easily, guiding locals through the winter terrain, helping transport supplies to outlying farms. Dara refined her maps to obsessive perfection, preparing the final versions for sale. They became fixtures at the Oakwood, the human guide and the orc cartographer, always together. Some locals stared at first, unused to seeing an orc in their community, but Dara's quiet competence and Benedict's reputation won respect. By midwinter, they were simply Benedict and Dara, accepted parts of the community. On the longest night of winter, a solstice celebration filled the common room with music and warmth. Benedict and Dara sat together near the fire, watching locals dance and drink, An old farmer approached, slightly drunk, eyes curious. "You two married?" he asked bluntly. Benedict blinked. They had not discussed marriage, had been together only a few months, but the question did not feel premature. It felt inevitable. He looked at Dara, who met his eyes with a small smile. "Not yet," Benedict said, "but I would like to be." The farmer laughed and moved away. Dara raised an eyebrow. That was a proposal. It was a statement of intent. Benedict took her hand. "The actual proposal should probably be more romantic." "I am not particularly romantic. Neither am I." He threaded his fingers through hers. "But I love you and I want to spend my life with you." That seems important to say properly. Dara's eyes widened. They had not said the words before, had skirted around them without quite committing. Now they hung in the air between them, solid and real. She squeezed his hand hard. "I love you too," she said, voice rough with emotion. "And yes, I want to marry you. Just like that, just like that." She leaned in, kissing him softly. "We have never been conventional. Why start now?" They married in early spring, in a simple ceremony conducted by the town's mayor in the common room of the Oakwood. The innkeepers served as witnesses. Dara wore a new dress, deep blue wool that complemented her green skin. Benedict wore his cleanest clothes and felt absurdly nervous despite having faced down avalanches and mountain storms without flinching. The vows were traditional, promises to love and honor through whatever came. When the mayor pronounced them married, Benedict kissed his wife with a sense of profound rightness. This was what he had been searching for without knowing it: partnership, purpose, love. Not the recovery of his old life, but the creation of something entirely new. They honeymooned by returning to the mountains, resuming their mapping work as soon as the passes cleared. It was perfect for them, no idle luxury, but the work they both loved, done together. The maps neared completion through spring and into summer. Dara refined the final details while Benedict contributed notes about seasonal variations and hazards. In late summer, they carried the completed work to the territorial capital, presenting it to the survey office. The chief surveyor studied the maps for a long time, occasionally glancing up at Dara in surprise. "This is extraordinary work," he said finally. "Far more detailed than anything in our current collection. You said you want to sell the whole set." "Yes," Dara said. "We are prepared to negotiate a fair price." The negotiation took 3 days. In the end, the territorial government paid a sum that made Benedict's head spin. It was enough to buy land, build a house, fund years of comfortable living, or to finance more mapping projects, more explorations. They walked out of the survey office in a daze, the bank draft safely tucked in Benedict's coat. On the Capitol steps, Dara stopped, turning to him with an expression he could not quite read. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "With the money, with our lives, what do you want?" Benedict considered. He could want the safe thing: buy a farm, settle down, stop risking himself on mountain passes. 3 years ago that would have been his answer. But Dara had changed him, or perhaps reminded him who he had been before fear took over. "I want to keep doing this," he said. "Mapping, exploring, guiding. The frontier is vast. There is so much work to be done, even though it is dangerous, because it is difficult." He took her hands. "I spent 3 years afraid. I do not want to spend the rest of my life that way. I want to do work that matters with you beside me." Dara's smile was radiant. "Then that is what we will do." They purchased equipment and supplies, outfitting themselves for serious expedition work. Word of Dara's maps had spread, and offers came quickly. A mining company wanted surveys of mountain regions suspected to hold valuable ore. A ranching consortium needed maps of grazing lands in the high country. The territorial governor himself requested a comprehensive survey of the northern frontier. Benedict and Dara took the jobs that interested them, turned down the ones that did not. They worked through summer and autumn, returning to Farrow's Creek each winter. The Oakwood became their permanent base, the room on the second floor their home between expeditions. The inn's owners became friends, then something like family. Life fell into a rhythm. 6 months traveling and working, 6 months wintering in town. The work was demanding, occasionally dangerous, always satisfying. They mapped regions no one had properly surveyed before, discovered passes and routes that became crucial to frontier expansion. Benedict's reputation as a guide grew. Dara's as a cartographer became legendary. But more than professional success, they built a life together. Learned each other's rhythms and quirks, fought and reconciled, celebrated triumphs and weathered setbacks. Dara taught Benedict to see terrain through a cartographer's eyes, to notice details he had overlooked as a ranger. Benedict taught Dara to read weather patterns, to move efficiently through wilderness. They were partners in the truest sense, each making the other better at what they did best. In their 3rd year of marriage, as autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, they completed a major survey of the northern frontier. The work had taken 8 months, pushing them into terrain few humans or orcs had ever seen. They returned to Farrow's Creek exhausted but triumphant, carrying maps that would reshape understanding of the region. That night, lying in their familiar bed at the Oakwood, Dara turned to Benedict with a thoughtful expression. "I am pregnant," she said simply. Benedict's breath caught. They had not been trying, had not really discussed children, but neither had they been preventing them. He sat up, searching her face. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be without a healer's confirmation." She placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "But yes, I am certain." "How do you feel about it?" "Terrified," Dara admitted. "Our lives are not exactly stable. We spend half the year in the wilderness. This changes everything." "Does it have to?" Benedict took her hand. "People raise children on the frontier. It is difficult but not impossible." "I do not want to stop the work." "Neither do I," he thought carefully. "What if we adjusted the work instead of stopping it? Shorter expeditions, stay closer to settled areas. We have enough saved now that we can be selective about which jobs we take." Dara nodded slowly. "That could work. For a few years at least, until the child is old enough for longer travel. Or we bring the child with us." Benedict warmed to the idea. "Plenty of frontier families travel. We would just be more careful about where and when." They talked late into the night, planning and adjusting. By morning, the initial terror had settled into cautious excitement. A child was not the end of their adventurous life, just a new dimension to it. Another challenge to navigate together. Dara's pregnancy progressed smoothly. They spent the winter in Farrow's Creek, taking only local guiding jobs, preparing for the changes ahead. The innkeeper's wife, who had raised 5 children, provided advice and baby clothes. The town's healer checked on Dara regularly, pronouncing her healthy and strong. In early spring, as the snow melted and the first flowers appeared, Dara went into labor. Benedict had faced avalanches and mountain storms without flinching, but his wife's labor terrified him in ways nothing else had. He held her hand and tried to be useful while the healer and the innkeeper's wife managed the actual work. 12 hours later, a baby's cry filled their room. The healer placed a squirming, green-skinned infant in Dara's arms. "A boy," she announced, "healthy and loud." Benedict stared at his son, overwhelmed. The baby was perfect, tiny tusks barely visible, skin a lighter shade of green than Dara's, a shock of black hair. 10 fingers, 10 toes, eyes squeezed shut as he wailed his displeasure at the world. "Hello, Nathaniel," Dara murmured, the name they had chosen weeks ago. "Welcome." Little Nathaniel Frost proved to be a good traveler from the start. They resumed their work when he was 3 months old, taking short expeditions, returning frequently to Farrow's Creek. Benedict fashioned a carrier that allowed Dara to work with the baby strapped to her back. Nathaniel seemed to enjoy the movement, often sleeping through map-making sessions and easy hikes. As he grew, the logistics became more complicated but not impossible. They adjusted, adapted, found ways to make it work. Nathaniel took his first steps on a mountain meadow, spoke his first words in their room at the Oakwood, learned to ride perched in front of his father on the saddle. When Nathaniel was 2, Dara became pregnant again. This time they were better prepared, knowing what to expect. Their second son, Elias, arrived during a spring thunderstorm, howling his arrival as thunder rolled over the valley. He was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Olive, who inherited Benedict's hazel eyes along with Dara's green skin. 3 children changed the rhythm of their work but did not stop it. They became a traveling family, known throughout the frontier. The human guide, the orc cartographer, and their mixed heritage children, mapping the wilderness together. It was an unconventional life, but it was theirs and they made it work. The children grew up strong and competent, learning terrain reading from their mother, wilderness skills from their father. By the time Nathaniel was 8, Elias 6, and Olive 4, they were all capable hikers who could handle moderate terrain without complaint. That summer, they undertook their most ambitious project yet, a comprehensive survey of the entire mountain pass system they had started mapping years ago. It would take 3 months, covering hundreds of miles of wilderness. The children were excited, treating it as a grand adventure. They departed Farrow's Creek in late spring, striking out into familiar territory. The early weeks went smoothly, the family falling into practiced routines. Nathaniel helped his mother with measurements. Elias kept notes. Olive collected interesting rocks and told elaborate stories about them. Benedict navigated and kept everyone safe. 2 months into the expedition, they reached the section of pass where Benedict had lost his party to the avalanche 9 years ago. He had known they would come here eventually, had steeled himself for it. Still, when the terrain became recognizable, his chest tightened. Dara noticed immediately. She always did. That night after the children were asleep, she sat beside him at the fire. "You want to talk about it?" Benedict stared into the flames. "I have not been back here since it happened. I thought I was ready. I am not sure I am. We can take a different route. The map can show this section as less detailed." "No." He shook his head. "Running from it will not help. I need to face it." The next morning they hiked through the avalanche zone. Benedict pointed out the terrain features to Nathaniel, explaining how avalanches formed, how to recognize dangerous conditions. His voice was steady, professional. Inside, he was remembering. They stopped for lunch at the exact spot where his old party had camped the night before the slide. Benedict stood looking up at the slope, remembering faces, voices, laughter. Remembering the crushing weight of snow, the terrible silence after, small arms wrapped around his waist, Olive hugging him fiercely. "You look sad, Papa." He crouched down, gathering her close. "I am remembering people who died here, little one. It makes me sad." "Did you know them?" "Yes, I was their guide. I led them here." Olive frowned, considering this. "But you are a good guide. You keep us safe." "I try to. But sometimes bad things happen even when we try our best." He looked up at Dara, who watched with understanding in her eyes. "The important thing is to learn from mistakes, to do better, to not let fear stop us from doing important work." Nathaniel, listening nearby, spoke up. "Is that why you stopped being a ranger? Because you were afraid?" Benedict had never hidden the truth from his children, but hearing it stated so plainly still stung. "Yes, For a long time I let fear control my choices." "What changed?" Elias asked. Benedict looked at Dara, who smiled. "Your mother changed everything. She reminded me that some things are worth being brave for." They resumed the survey, working through the avalanche zone with meticulous care. Benedict contributed detailed notes about seasonal hazards, drawing on his ranger training and the hard lessons of experience. The maps that resulted were the most comprehensive safety documentation of the region ever created. Completing that section felt like closing a circle. Benedict had not erased the past. The 4 people who died would always be gone, but he had transformed it. Their deaths had taught him caution without paralysis, respect for the mountain without fear. That knowledge, encoded in Dara's maps, would help keep future travelers safe. The rest of the expedition proceeded smoothly. They returned to Pharaoh's Creek in late summer, maps complete, family intact. The survey office purchased the new maps immediately, paying handsomely. The family's reputation was secured. More than that, though, they had proved to themselves that they could handle anything together. Years continued to pass. The children grew, eventually choosing their own paths. Nathaniel became a ranger, joining the territorial service with his father's blessing and his mother's maps. Elias developed a passion for geology, combining cartography with mineral surveying. Olive surprised everyone by becoming a writer, publishing accounts of frontier life that captivated readers across the territory. Benedict and Dara continued their work well into their 50s, slowing down but never stopping. They mapped new regions, trained younger surveyors, consulted on major expeditions. Their maps became the gold standard for the territory, trusted by everyone from commercial traders to military planners. But more than professional legacy, they built a family legacy. 3 children who grew up competent and confident, who understood both the beauty and the danger of the wilderness, who made their own marks on the frontier. Grandchildren eventually followed, a rowdy collection of mixed heritage kids who called the mountains their playground. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Benedict and Dara returned to the Cliffside Rest, the inn where they had first met. The building had changed ownership, been renovated, but room 7 was still there, still the same small space with 1 bed. The new innkeeper, unaware of the history, started to apologize for the cramped quarters. Benedict waved him off. "1 bed is perfect. My wife prefers the left side anyway." They spent the night in the familiar room, now elderly visitors rather than stranded strangers. Dara spread her maps on the floor, showing Benedict the complete collection, 20 years of work, covering thousands of square miles. It was an extraordinary achievement, a permanent contribution to the frontier's development. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the innkeeper had found 2 rooms that night?" Dara asked, lying on her preferred left side, head pillowed on Benedict's shoulder. "Sometimes," Benedict admitted, "but I think we would have found each other eventually. Some partnerships are inevitable. That is a romantic notion, not like you. I have learned to be romantic over the years. You taught me." Dara laughed softly. "I taught you to read contour lines and evaluate terrain. Romance you developed on your own." They lay in comfortable silence, listening to rain on the roof. Some things never changed. The mountains still stood, storms still came, and they still fit together perfectly, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, 2 halves of a whole. "Thank you," Benedict said quietly. "For what?" "For claiming the left side of this bed 20 years ago, for being patient with me, for showing me how to be brave again." He kissed her forehead. "For everything." Dara was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for being willing to share the bed. For trusting our judgment together. For building this life with me." They fell asleep like that, just as they had hundreds of times before in the room where their story began. Outside, the storm raged, but inside they were warm and safe and together. The mountains would still be there in the morning. So would they, ready for whatever came next, because that was what they did. They faced terrain together, reading the landscape and each other with equal skill. They made decisions together, trusting their combined judgment. They built a life together, one expedition at a time, one map at a time, one choice at a time. It had started with one bed left and an orc girl claiming the left side. It had become a partnership that spanned 2 decades, 3 children, countless maps, and immeasurable love. Not because it was easy, it rarely was, but because they chose it, over and over, day after day. That choice, renewed constantly, was the real map they had created. A chart showing the terrain of a life built together, with all its peaks and valleys, its dangerous passes and safe harbors. A map that said, here is how 2 people became one partnership. Here is how fear transforms into courage. Here is how love looks when it is tested and proven true. And that map, invisible but undeniable, would guide them for whatever years remained, just as it had guided them from that first night to this one. Together, as they had always been. Together, as they would always be, the left side and the right side of one bed, meeting in the middle. 2 people who had learned, slowly and surely, that the middle was where they belonged.